Welcome back to this guest segment with Walter Eggers, a top-ranked podcaster. And Walter shares how his traditional role as a father and patriarch of his family completely shifted and devastated his life. But through that devastation, through that process, a podcast was born.
Welcome to Thriving Beyond, the podcast with stories of thriving through when the obstacles are far from few. Here's your host, whose own story has been featured in Chicken Soup for the Soul, Vidal Cisneros Jr.
Welcome back to another episode of Thriving Beyond. I'm excited. Today we have Walter Eggers with us. Walter, how are you doing, brother? And welcome to Thriving Beyond.
First, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. And every day's great. Every day's great because I choose to make it so. That's really what it comes down to.
Amen. So if you could sum up what you do in one sentence or less, what would that sentence be, Walter?
What I do is provide wisdom, community, tactics, resources, and everything the single dad and single families need.
Right on. I love that, man. See, this is the family feel that I love talking about on some of these podcast episodes. And me as a father, as a divorcee, and you know, this co-parenting dynamic that I have with my family life, I love it. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. And I'm not sure if you've ever interviewed on your podcast show. What's the name of your podcast show, by the way, just for the audience?
It's called We Rad Dads.
Radical name. Right on.
Yeah. Definitely stuck. And I'm with you on this one. The co-parenting, the blended, the non-traditional dad thing has I had a vision of what it was supposed to be by the people I was surrounded by, and it was so negative and everything. And I wanted something different, and I made it. And I'm really glad that I'm gathering all these stories and all these people and disseminating this, that other people are seeing that too. And it's not all doom and gloom. It's pretty cool, actually.
So can you share with us a ritual that you implement, whether it's a morning ritual, daytime ritual, a napping ritual, anything that you can share with us that helps ignite your day?
Oh, napping ritual. That would be amazing, right? I've been working really hard to implement some sort of a miracle morning status or, different rituals like reading. But to be honest with you, I have failed miserably, and I've tried so hard to implement something. The one thing that is consistent, however, is my gratitude practice. And that usually happens just before I close my eyes at night. And if I do recall in the mornings, like this morning, for example, I'll do it again. Say, hey, thank you for X, Y. Thank you for these people. Thank you for my life. Thank you for my son and the roof over my head. It's just, there's so much to be grateful for that a lot of times we just kind of gloss over and take for granted.
Amen. On this show, it's all about gratitude. So gratitude is the attitude that gives us altitude. There's no doubt about that. So listeners, Thrive Nation, you guys know what I'm talking about when it comes to the gratitude rituals in the morning. The Miracle Morning book is essential. So that is, way back when, even when I was in 2009, starting, my life storm, so to speak, and moving forward, Walter's going to share some of his, his triumph and tragedy kind of story. So, but way back when in 2009, before the Miracle Morning ever even became self-published or published for that matter, I remember implementing my own gratitude ritual, like you mentioned. And I so wanted something like that Miracle Morning book to be in effect back then. That would have been so awesome. But nonetheless, I still took the intentional steps and I made it my ritual, because a book is only going to sit on your shelf for so long. Let's just be honest. How many people finish a book from front to back? Very few. Unless...
Not me.
Right. Unless it's something that you're absolutely craving and you need to have it, right? So thank you so much for sharing that, Walter. And let's get into a life storm that you've experienced, whether it's business, personal. This is where we absolutely share and value transparency. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story. And if you could unpack the global view from up above, that 10,000 view in the air, that global perspective, to give our audience just some backstory, some context, and it's bring us down to the day-to-day curbside view so we can really see, feel, and experience what you were going through back in one of those tough life storms.
Yeah, it was the pivotal moment in my existence thus far, and it's a really defining moment. Those things often they happen simultaneously, and really the short story is I was a firefighter for 15 years, and it was everything that I wanted to be. And it just lit me up. It was one of those jobs that it was who I am. And therein lies a bit of the problem, of course. So I'm working so hard at this. And as anybody in public service knows, it's a huge life sacrifice. I found my son was on the way, my last fire season. And, we ended up, his mother and I got together and she, was helping raise her stepdaughter while I was still trying to find my way in professional fire. I got my opportunity right as my son was born, and everybody knows, like, your life completely changes when that happens. And it didn't work well because I kept my old mind frame, and I just kept pushing through, and I kept putting my job before everything, and that was where my value had always been. And so eventually what ended up happening is I through stress, through overwork, through being, forced into the probationary lifestyle at work, and associated stress there, I lost my health to the point where I succumbed to a back injury, which then was the kind of the tipping point catalyst where I lost my health, I lost my career, and then I ended up losing my relationship as well. And as with life storms, the really difficult ones, it seems that it's never just that one thing that tips the balance. It's a mixture of at least 2 to 3 major life circumstances. And so that was the downfall, so to speak. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you my family is the downfall, because that is actually my saving grace at the moment, and forever, the way I see it. But it allowed me to see that I put my job before everything, and I valued what I did above who I was. And I found that as a very, very common downfall for especially men. And I'm very happy to tell you today that I don't have any desire if they was offered the best job in the world as a firefighter. As much as I respect that, for me, it's not for me. Being a dad is for me. And so, that's what my life now has become, is about being the best dad, about making that choice, and about going that route as opposed to, putting everything to the side. And I think a lot of people, divorced dads or what have you, can resonate with the fact that maybe, we place a little bit too much emphasis on our work and not enough on our families. So, and then of course, the other side of it is where I'm at now. And I'm having a great co-parenting experience. I've rebuilt that relationship. Our family is really tight. We actually do a lot of things together, and I go to her and she comes to me with a lot of helpful and supportive type things. So we've come full circle in just a short amount of time.
That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. That you're successful with the whole co-parenting thing. And yes, us men, we do get a little obsessive. That's just the way we are. We are builders. We are fixers. We want to tinker, and how we come alive, and this is for all the women out there listening, how we men come alive, it's through our physiology. It's through using our body, right? And being doers. Not always thinkers, but more so doing and building and sitting in the garage, in the cave downstairs, and just trying to be hunters, so to speak, right? We're chasing something. We have to be doing something. So, yes, I fell into that trap of workaholism for many, many years, and that was the downfall to my first marriage. And because of these limiting beliefs that we put upon ourselves, sometimes that provider belief overrides the "am I going to be a good parent" belief. And as men, we tend to model other generations behind us that had that provider mentality. Provide was hammered into me every single day, Walter.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Me too. I was very traditional growing up, and that's what we were programmed to do. And that's how we feel that we're loving and we're supporting our families. We're providing for them. And money tends to be, quite obviously the currency of that affection. And that doesn't always equate. And that's another thing that I've found doing what I'm doing is, hey, you can keep the money. I want my family. That's where my value is now. And so I'm happy to have changed that paradigm from the traditional aspect, not only in parenting, but when looking at life and a career. If you go to another country, Ireland, for example, and if you start talking about who you are, and you say, "Oh, I'm a construction worker, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor," and they'll look at you funny because they know that's not who you are, and that those lines, they don't exist. So it's something that we've kind of placed on ourselves, and it's it's a tough one, to be fed that your entire life and then realize, hey, wait a minute, I got to break out of this because it's constricting, it's choking everything else in my life.
Absolutely. And we're definitely resonating. I love this story. I can relate on so many levels. And you as a firefighter, I commend you just for all the service that you provided. I know I've got a lot of good friends that are firefighters as well, and it is a grind with the schedule. I definitely commend you on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate that. You know what I realized through this whole thing is I had a huge sense of loss when I lost that career path and I lost my health to a certain degree to where I just couldn't do it anymore. And I realized that in doing what I'm doing now, I will help more people than I could ever possibly have helped, riding on an engine. And as much as I love that, that gives me the better feeling knowing that right now I can help more in a better way.
Absolutely. I completely resonate with what you said. Being in the public sector and the public eye for so many years as a project site manager for a decade, I worked with law enforcement and I worked sometimes with emergency services as well on the freeways. And there's a thrill, there's an adrenaline rush because there's a purpose instantly to your job. I was providing traffic control service for freeway construction companies so that they can be safe, so on and so forth. Same thing, with your past career, it was public service driven. And what you're doing is to protect other lives, to keep them safe. And that's what gives us the juice, right? But then when we step away from that, what are we going to feed that part of us? And like you mentioned, Walter, I'm the same way. Doing this podcast, speaking, writing, doing things that are uncomfortable that I've never done before.
Yeah.
That's where the growth and the thriving lies, and that's what fulfills that adrenaline rush that I still seek sometimes.
Yeah, well, I want to hit on that real quick because Sebastian Junger actually he's a director for a movie called Restrepo, and he was embedded with a group of soldiers for a very long period of time. It's on Netflix if you want to watch that. It's called Restrepo, but he's also been on several different podcasts. One of which is a TEDx, I believe, podcast. I highly recommend you check it out because he talks about the reality that is adrenaline addiction. And after that, I actually realized what had been going on with me through my job and why I was so addicted to the job. And it was literally like a chemical addiction of adrenaline in my brain that job it induced in me. So, that's a real thing. And I think you might want to check it out yourself, Vidal.
Absolutely. We'll share the link in the show description. So thank you for sharing that. And yes, I completely had that same thing. I was chasing the adrenaline. Yeah. And that's why I flipped it on its head and now it's all service based. I'm pushing myself out of my comfort zone, much like you are, to serve others, right? To connect with others.
Absolutely. You have to do that to grow. I mean, that's all there is to it. You just keep pushing yourself out of your comfort zone and eventually, there's a rush associated with it. That's all there is to it. I'm in the same boat there. So I'm glad you found that as well.
Amen. This is the Thrive Nation ethos. It's about thriving, not surviving. Existing is fine in recovery. When we come back from that adrenaline seeking recovery phase, now it's about evolving, growing, getting to that next level, and you're not that person that you were before. And that's the essence of thriving, is just evolving and having this reinventing of yourself. So thank you so much for sharing that. And is there one aha moment during that struggle between what am I going to do to feed the adrenaline and what am I going to do now that I'm not, that I've lost this other identity? Because I had that same kind of like pull where I was in transition phase, Walter, and a part of me wanted to go back there because that's all I knew. The neurons are so deep and embedded within our brain that it's hard to override that. And many times I fell back and I go back there and just check up on the guys and I'm like, no, it's not me anymore. It's not me. And I had to focus on the new identity. What were some of the aha moments that you had to help propel you past the old overriding programming or just overriding that old programming for yourself?
For me, the physical nature of my job and my life to that point, I was an outdoorsman. I enjoy backpacking. I challenged myself with the Spartan Beast. Actually did quite well in that, by the way. So very active, and then having not only the injury, but then being a stay-at-home dad and being a proxy stepdad and an actual dad to an infant. it really took me out of my happy place, all of my happy places, work and everything. And so my lowest point was associated directly with that aha moment. It happened simultaneously. And I'm ashamed. I'm actually ashamed to talk about it, but I'll be completely transparent with you and your audience, is that I was sitting on the couch with my very young son, and it was just loathing in my own misery, and I realized at that moment that the reason I was so miserable, I was blaming other people, and the other people I was blaming was my family. And I realized that I couldn't blame my innocent infant child, and it really just shocked me. It brought me to tears. The first time I talked about it on a podcast, it actually did bring me to tears, and it hurts. It hurts me a lot to really say that out loud, but that's my reality. And once that moment took place, immediately afterwards, I said, this isn't me. This isn't who I was raised to be. This isn't what I want to be, not to my son or to anybody else. I don't care. How do I become better? And from that moment forward, I was dead set on improving myself any way possible. And I set out looking for things to do just that, to improve my mindset, to improve my attitude, to improve my relationships, to improve myself as best I could. And not having a physical outlet because of an injury, it was very difficult to process all this stuff. Just kind of cookie cutter. I get every day was the same, and I couldn't break out of it. And so I tried to find things that helped me out in that process. And a lot of that started with kind of words of motivation and quotes and different things. I mean, something as simple as finding memes and what have you on Instagram and Facebook, those motivational things. And then it progressed to, motivational videos on YouTube and different things that I would find. And then eventually I found podcasting in this process. And I realized that I can improve myself and not have the vulnerability to be openly improving myself in front of other people for criticism. So I didn't have to open myself up to that. And I thought, hey, wait a minute, there's something here. Because most people would think I'm listening to videos or music or, not doing anything. But in reality, I'm improving myself. I'm being vulnerable to my content, to the things that I was listening to. And it was a very safe place to do that. And every day it was like I went to see a counselor, which of course I couldn't afford. and I was figuring things out for myself, which is even more rewarding. And that's when my podcasting addiction grew and grew. And that was my aha moment, is that very low point. But what it started was the rest of my life, where I would not only listening and consuming to podcasts, I was distributing them. And then I was talking to other men. I was reaching out to men's groups. I was trying to reach out to dads groups. I was figuring out, how to take care of a young child and how to do the blended family thing. And the bombs didn't stop dropping at that point. They kept coming, but we were able to eventually find the happy middle ground that we're at right now, as a matter of fact. And I'm sorry about the phone. That was actually my son's mom calling. We FaceTime every day and every night, every morning and every night. So I will get a chance to talk to my son. I just spent several days with him. But it's very important that communication. It's clear that we've come a long way since the bomb. And
yes,
yeah, there's another story there, but I don't want to tell her story. That's not why I'm here. And
right.
I'll tell you, we'll skip over that part and say that we're good now after a lot of work and a lot of work on myself and my family.
That's awesome, Walter. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you mentioned watching inspirational videos, motivational videos. When you get to a certain level, when you are full of all this inspiration. Now, in the beginning phase, yes, you need to override the old programming. So you just try to flood it with some new words of inspiration, motivation. I went through that phase. We all go through that phase where we need to be fed, because sometimes going to church, if you're doing that Christian walk, isn't enough. You need it daily. You need it hourly. When you're going through addiction recovery, you need it sometimes minute to minute, because you are in the thick of the storm.
Yes.
So there's nothing wrong with, doing that. But once you get to that next level where you're not going through trying to override the old programming, the next level is, okay, I have to do something, take action. So now
Yes.
you become a doer. You're podcasting, you're teaching, you're training, you're becoming a coach. Now that old you that was in that stage of transition, trying to figure out what you were going to do, and you're watching all these inspirational videos, much like I was, and listening to other podcasts, that doesn't serve you anymore, because now you're creating your own content. Now you're a creator, you're a doer. And this is where the growth lies. It doesn't lie in sitting there every morning watching YouTube videos, listening or watching all this stuff and Instagram and, just getting inundated. That's not where the thriving aspect begins. The thriving aspect begins when we interact and engage with others, whether it's through podcasting, Facebook messages. Just connecting with others is really going to make the big difference if you are in that phase and you're trying to figure out, how can I get out from this phase into the next? So thank you so much for sharing that. You definitely got me on a little rant because I'm excited about this content that we're sharing with you guys. And was there advice from a coach, maybe an old fire captain, a friend, family member that helped switch things for you when you were in the thick of that storm?
Well, excuse me. Yes. Yeah. Thank you for that, by the way. I'm ranting as well. Like this is my realm. There's been a lot of advice through my time, especially in firefighting. And there's some old dogs out there that I really looked up to. Unfortunately, that was a time when I wasn't receptive to it. I wasn't responsive. I didn't need to, it was a whole nother branch of my life's tree, so to speak. There's been a couple of things that stuck with me, and I started by just writing all these things down. As something resonated with me, I would make a list in my phone, and whenever I was feeling low, I'd just go through that list. And there's been a couple that come by. And as I mentioned before, the podcasting has been really instrumental in my change because it was personal growth. I thought I was alone. I was in an isolation period where, we retreat into the man cave, the safe space of our minds. A lot of times we fill that with addictions or distractions. Like, I was into, video gaming. I haven't touched my video game console in a long time. I would just plug in, because it was this alternate reality. People turn to alcohol or pornography or any of that stuff. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I didn't. But when I finally made that pivot, I cut all those things off, cut them out of my life completely. And I started listening to podcasts. And one of the things that I heard, and I wrote it down. I have a cue card right here in front of me, and I keep it in my desk. It says, "Now matters. The choices we make determine who we are becoming, which determine where we go and where we end up in our life." That is a quote from Hal Elrod. And that he was a guest on a program, and it really hit me like, if I really want tomorrow to be awesome, I've got to start today. And every little thing I do today, good or bad, has ripple effect into the future. And so why not do the best? Because I want to ride that ripple to the positive direction. I could so easily just not be concerned with it, not take charge of my future, and ride the ripples into the negativity, the desperation of a long gray kind of existence floating about in this ocean of more or less despair. So why don't I take charge of my life? And that's exactly what that quote means to me.
Beautiful quote. Thank you for sharing that, Walter. So what's the best advice that you can give in a 2 to 3 step formula, Walter, for somebody that's going through similar adversity right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you asked. Thank you. It's something I don't know if I heard it somewhere. Maybe I heard it in pieces, but I kind of put it together on my own. And it's so simple. It's mind-boggling, really. And through this whole process, and of course, we're just doing the peaks here because there's so much more. And if, of course, we'll get into the contact. If you'd like to contact me, I'm completely open with that, by the way. But back to the question, is a 2 to 3 step formula. It's very simple. Find yourself. That it's a trifecta, by the way. The first step is find yourself. Whatever you are, whoever you are at your core, just start looking for yourself. Find yourself. Step 1. Step 2, know yourself. When you start to be able to find yourself, explore exactly what that is and what that isn't in yourself. Know yourself. Know who you are at your core. Know who you want to be. Know what you want to be and where. And then the third part of that trifecta is just be yourself. It's that action. It's taking action on those first two principles. It's unapologetically being yourself and being happy with the fact that you don't have to hide or mask from anybody anymore. You are just you, and you're doing the best you can. And I'm going to throw this in here because we're talking quotes, and I pulled this out of my my note cards. It's Maya Angelou. It says, "Do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better." So I'm going to go to that trifecta one more time. Find yourself, know yourself, be yourself.
Love it. Simple, to the point. That's what listeners need. Thank you so much for sharing that, brother. That's kind of what I've been talking about this week on some of my Facebook Live videos that I've been doing lately. It's been the fact that we don't need a PhD for enlightenment or shifting our life. All we need to do is make a choice, an intentional, conscious choice. And remember, the subconscious mind is grabbing everything in the background. So you want to flood the subconscious mind with the things that you want moving forward for your life. If you're flooding it with reality TV and drama this, drama that, and negative news, negative that, all of this like neurotic stuff that's going to keep your nervous system fried and paranoid, that's not where you want to be. You want to flood it with people that are doing things and are in places where you want to head. Connect with them. Listen to their podcast. Listen to Walter's We Rad Dads podcast if you want to learn more about what Walter's up to. Now we're going to segue into the next part. And Walter, what is the one thing that you want to be remembered for 100 years from today? So let's say there is a statue that's erected in your name 100 years from today. It stands the test of time. Maybe you're still alive. Maybe you're going to live to 300 years old. You never know.
You never know with modern science.
Exactly. So you could be in what is that called?
Cryogenic stasis?
Yes. And then we revive you. So you're back and you see your statue, and there's one legendary thing that you're remembered for. So what would that one legendary thing, at least that one legendary thing that you would hope to be remembered for, Walter?
Succinctly in a phrase, We Rad Dads as a whole, not just the podcast, but what I'm creating it to be. And it's more than just a podcast. Right now it's not, but that's where I'm headed. And just to be known as the guy who set about trying to bring a positive change to not only men, not only their families, but parents and society as a whole. Just my little corner here. And I don't have this delusion of grandeur other than I just want everyone to have an awesome life. And there's no reason as men, as parents, as the patriarchs of our family units, or even just to influence those around us, we can do so in a positive way. So I want to be remembered for my mark, what is now known as We Rad Dads.
Right on. And that last question, Walter, is not to feed the ego. It's to leave a legacy so that we focus on leaving a legacy, because I believe many times we as a society, we're focused on getting the titles, getting the status quo bank account at a certain point, the currency. And legacy and leaving a powerful message is what I really want people listening to this podcast to learn from that question, right? It isn't ego driven. It's what are we focusing on in our life? Is it getting to work, getting that check, and that's it? That's your existence? Or is it leaving a legacy? So thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah. Oh, no, I'm glad you brought up legacy. And legacy is for us all, every single one of us. I would, if you haven't already, or if you haven't recently, consider your legacy. I mean, it's just huge.
Absolutely. So besides We Rad Dads, listening to your podcast, where else can our audience connect with you further?
Well, I'm always available via email, at walter@weraddads.com. But I host a Facebook group, and that's the biggest part of what I'm trying to grow. The podcast is awesome, but it's a one-way channel. I love to focus as much on my guests and have them just kind of relay their wisdom. But the We Rad Dads group, those are two different things, group and page, apparently. The We Rad Dads group is where two-way conversations happen. That's where I do my weekly live Facebook videos. That's where we have discussions about, maybe somebody's having a problem with, how to be a parent, or how to be a better co-parent, or, just how to move forward in their life, in their career. They don't know what's going on. That's exactly the kind of place that I was searching for in my lowest point, and trying to escape what I knew I didn't towards something that I thought I did. that is the best place to contact me. I'm also available. I have an Instagram. We have We Rad Dads on Twitter. There's some Pinterest boards that I've got going up, although I haven't touched them much lately. There's some great information over there. So come connect with us over at weraddads.com. And of course, the links are out all over the place. So I gave you about 6 different things to do. I'd say if you're going to do one of them, go listen to the podcast. Episode 40 and 41 are our 2-part top 10 episode, if that makes sense to you. Go over there, listen to those, and then share them with somebody that you think may find value in them, and say, hey, this is cool, or hey, I thought this is something that you maybe help you with, or what have you. So though that would be the one thing I would say, just go out and listen and share.
That will all be in the episode description. Thank you, Walter, for your time. All right, everybody, thank you for listening. As always, keep going, keep growing, and keep on thriving, because it's way better than just surviving. Until next time.
Thanks for listening. For recaps and to claim bonus gifts, head over to thriving beyond podcast.com. Keep thriving.